Have you ever been in a situation where you felt something was about to happen, something you knew wasn't right, but for a second you almost went through with it? What if that something was a simple lapse in judgment that could change everything? Today we're diving into a story that many would say is impossible, but it happened. Before we continue, don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos like this. It was one of those rare weekends when my mom was away. She was on a work trip, leaving me and my dad to figure things out. We didn't do much when she was home, but somehow, without her around, the whole vibe changed. The house felt different, more like an unfamiliar space. We were alone, and maybe that's what made it all strange. Dad and I had always been close. Nothing unusual about it. He was the type to watch movies with me, help with homework, and even cook dinner when Mom wasn't around. Nothing to suggest any odd behavior, and I never thought twice about how close we were. But that weekend it was like something was off, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. It started with a casual conversation over breakfast. He was sitting across from me at the kitchen table sipping his coffee, and we were chatting about work, the weather, and some random things, nothing out of the ordinary. But then the topic shifted to how I was doing, and before I knew it we were talking about relationships. "How's your love life going?" he asked in a tone that was casual but just a little too curious. I chuckled nervously. I mean, what's a daughter supposed to say to her dad about relationships? But for some reason I didn't feel uncomfortable. Maybe it was the fact that he had always been open with me, asking about things I didn't expect from a father. Things about my mom's past and relationships I'd seen him have after the divorce, but never anything that seemed too personal or invasive. So, I told him a little bit about my latest crush, just a simple story about a guy I had been seeing. Not too serious yet, but enough for me to mention it. To my surprise, Dad leaned in a little closer, his eyes narrowing as if genuinely interested. He didn't look at me like I was his daughter at that moment. It was almost as though he was seeing me as something else. That's when I started feeling a little uneasy, but I pushed it away, convinced it was all in my head. He was just being a dad, right? But as the conversation went on, something shifted. We were talking about boundaries, and I don't even remember how we got there. It was just a natural flow of the conversation, but at some point it got personal. He started telling me about his past relationships, how they had failed, and how he sometimes regretted not acting on certain things. Sometimes, he said, you don't know what you're missing until it's too late. It sounded like a weird philosophical comment, one of those things you say when you've had a couple drinks too many, but we were just sitting there having coffee, no alcohol in sight. Then he did something that froze me in place. He touched my hand, just lightly, as if trying to make some kind of connection. My heart skipped a beat, and I pulled my hand away instantly, but I didn't know what to say. I couldn't even look at him. What had just happened? Was I imagining things? I had no idea how to process it. The air felt thick. My mind raced with questions I didn't want to answer. Was this normal? Was I just overreacting? But the look on his face. He didn't seem uncomfortable. In fact, he seemed almost relieved, as though he had said something he had been thinking about for a while. He quickly apologized. "Sorry, I didn't mean to. I guess sometimes I forget where the boundaries are." But the tension lingered for the rest of the day. Every word felt loaded. Even when we sat down to watch a movie, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was building between us, something I couldn't control or understand. As night fell, the lines between comfort and something else blurred. I could feel the pressure mounting, the atmosphere shifting, and then, right when I thought things would go back to normal, he said something that would change everything. That night, after dinner, we decided to relax in the living room. The TV was on, but neither of us was really watching it. It felt like the room was full of unspoken words. I could see him out of the corner of my eye, and the way he was sitting too close to me for comfort made my skin prickle. We used to always sit next to each other like this, but now everything felt different. My stomach was in knots, and I couldn't focus on anything. Was it just me, or was he acting a little differently? It wasn't just the hand on mine earlier. It was his whole demeanor, more intense, more intent on our conversation. When he spoke, his voice was lower, softer, and somehow it made everything seem more intimate than it ever should have. Then, out of nowhere, he dropped a bombshell. "You know," he said casually, leaning closer, When your mom's not around, I feel like I can finally talk to you, like really talk. You get me in a way no one else does. I didn't know how to respond. I wasn't sure where this conversation was heading, and I didn't want to think about it too much. My mom wasn't here. He was vulnerable, and I could understand that. But still, something about the way he looked at me, it felt too personal. For a moment, I wondered if he had been feeling this way for a while. The longer we stayed there, the more I realized that it wasn't just me who felt the awkwardness. He seemed tense too, like he was fighting an internal battle. He shifted in his seat, his eyes not meeting mine but instead lingering on something just beyond me. I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded, trying to keep things normal. Yeah, I know, Dad, it's been nice to have the house to ourselves for a bit. The words felt empty the second I said them, as if they didn't even belong in this conversation. But Dad didn't seem to notice. He was lost in his thoughts, staring at the TV as if the images on the screen were the only things keeping him grounded. But then he did something that made my heart race. He placed his hand on my shoulder. It wasn't a tap or a casual touch. No, it was a firm, lingering pressure, as if he was trying to connect with me. My body tensed instantly, but I didn't pull away. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't bring myself to move. His touch was too much, but it felt strangely comforting at the same time. "Are you okay?" he asked. His voice almost a whisper now, like we were sharing some deep secret. I nodded again, this time with more force. "Yeah, I'm fine, just tired." But I wasn't fine. I was anything but fine. I could feel my pulse quicken, my breath catching in my chest. I didn't know how to navigate this anymore. I wanted to pull away, but the words didn't come. What if I was reading this all wrong? What if I was overreacting? His hand stayed there, and for a brief moment, I felt his fingers tighten ever so slightly, like he was waiting for some kind of response from me. But I couldn't give him one. I couldn't move. My thoughts were spinning too fast. I was on the edge of something I couldn't comprehend, and I didn't want to dive in. Then, almost as if on instinct, he withdrew his hand, suddenly standing up and walking toward the kitchen. "Sorry," he muttered, avoiding my gaze. "I think I just need a drink." He was acting like he didn't just cross some invisible line, like nothing had happened at all. But I knew something had changed. Something in the air had shifted, and I wasn't sure we could go back to the way things were before. I stayed there, frozen in place, trying to process what had just happened. My mind raced with confusion, guilt, and questions I didn't want to ask myself. What was going on? Was I imagining things, or was this real? As the evening went on, I tried to act normal, but the tension was unbearable. And just when I thought it couldn't get any stranger, Dad came back into the living room holding a glass of whiskey. He was different now, more composed, but still, that same look in his eyes, like he wasn't sure whether to speak or stay silent. He sat back down beside me, and I could feel the heat radiating off his body. The distance between us had shrunk so much in that moment that it felt like I could reach out and touch it. And then, just as I opened my mouth to say something, he leaned in. "Look," he said, his voice trembling slightly, "maybe this is wrong, but I can't help how I feel." His words hung in the air like a heavy fog, thick with meaning. I didn't know how to respond. It was like he had said what I had been secretly wondering, but hearing him admit it made it real. My heart thudded in my chest as I looked at him, unsure of whether I should run out of the room or stay and figure out what was really going on. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The room was still, almost eerily quiet. I couldn't meet his eyes. My mind was racing. Was he trying to tell me something? Was he saying this out of some weird emotional vulnerability? Or was there something deeper behind those words that I didn't want to understand? "Dad," I started, but the words caught in my throat. I didn't know what I was going to say. How could I say anything when everything felt so wrong? He seemed to sense my hesitation, and for a second it looked like he was going to apologize, to take everything back. But instead, he looked at me like he was waiting for me to make the first move, like somehow I was the one who held the power in that moment. But I didn't feel powerful. I felt small, uncertain, and terrified of what this conversation might lead to. You don't have to say anything, he said softly, his voice shaky now. I don't know why I'm saying this, but I can't keep pretending like I don't feel something. I know it's wrong, but there it is. I couldn't breathe. I didn't know whether I wanted to run away or stay and hear more, to understand what exactly he was trying to say. Was he really telling me that he felt something for me, or was he just in some kind of emotional state where everything felt distorted, like a person who just needed to get something off their chest? I tried to speak, but nothing came out. My mouth was dry, my heart was pounding, and the reality of what he had said was sinking in like cold water. I wanted to scream, to ask him what he meant by that, but I was frozen. I didn't know if I wanted the truth or if I wanted to stay in the bubble of uncertainty, pretending that this wasn't happening. He stood up again, pacing back and forth across the room like he couldn't sit still. He was clearly struggling with whatever was going on in his head. I felt like I was trapped in a storm, watching it tear everything apart around me, but there was nowhere to hide. I never should have said that, he muttered, almost to himself. I didn't mean it. But I can't stop thinking about it. About how I feel when you're around. Maybe I've just been alone too long. His voice trailed off and he stopped pacing, standing in front of me. His eyes wild, almost desperate for some kind of resolution. He was a man at war with himself, caught between what he knew was right and the feelings that had apparently overwhelmed him. I took a deep breath, trying to collect my thoughts. This wasn't just about what had happened in the last hour. No, this was a culmination of years of unspoken tension, years of little moments of his quiet affection, of how I had always been the one. Who was there for him when no one else was? Was this the breaking point? Was this the moment when everything shifted forever? Was it too late to go back to the way it was? You don't have to say these things, I finally managed to say, my voice shaking. I don't know what you're trying to tell me, but we can't do this. The words were like a slap in the face, and I could see it in his eyes. He looked disappointed, like he had hoped I would say something else, something that would make him feel better, less conflicted. But there was no way I could go along with whatever this was. There was no way I could pretend it was normal. He stepped back, visibly hurt. His expression shifted to one of shame, and for a brief second, he looked like the dad I had always known, the man who cared for me, who had been there for me, who had never crossed any boundaries. I know, he whispered. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said any of that. And just like that, the tension seemed to deflate, like a balloon losing all its air. But as much as I wanted to believe that everything could go back to normal, I knew it wouldn't. The seed had been planted. Something had changed, and it couldn't be undone. I stood up, my legs shaky as I tried to steady myself. I think it's best if we just go to bed. Get some rest. This weekend has been a lot. He didn't argue. He just nodded, his eyes downcast as though ashamed of what had happened. We both retreated to our separate rooms, but as I lay in bed, unable to sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that the worst wasn't over. The worst was yet to come. Just as I started to drift off, I heard a soft knock on my door. Dad, can I talk to you? He asked, his voice strained. I hesitated. What could he possibly want to say now? What more could we possibly say to each other? My heart skipped a beat, knowing this conversation wasn't over. It was only just beginning. I sat in silence for a moment, the knock on the door still ringing in my ears. My heart was racing again, and I couldn't quite understand what was happening. Was he really standing outside my door asking to talk more? We had already crossed a line, and now it felt like everything was teetering on the edge of something much worse. For a moment, I almost told him to leave, to go back to his room, to pretend none of this had happened. But something inside me, some twisted part of my mind, wanted to know what he would say next. What more could possibly come from this? Come in, I finally whispered, the words barely escaping my lips. The door creaked open, and there he was, standing in the doorway. He looked tired, his face drawn and pale under the soft light of my room. It was as though the weight of his confession had drained every ounce of energy from him. But still, there he was, looking like he was about to shatter. He didn't step inside right away. He just stood there, his gaze flicking between me and the floor, unsure of what to do. I didn't know if I was supposed to invite him in or wait for him to say something. It felt like we were both stuck in a moment we couldn't escape. "I don't know what to do anymore," he muttered finally, stepping inside. His voice low, like he was afraid someone else might hear. "I don't want to make things worse, but I don't know how to fix what happened." I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. "You're right. We can't undo what's been said, but we can try to figure out how to move forward without it getting worse." But even as I said it, I didn't know if I believed it. How could we go back to normal after everything that had happened? How could we pretend that what had been said, what had almost happened, didn't change the entire dynamic between us? He sat on the edge of my bed, his back straight, his hands clasped in his lap. He seemed more composed now, but I could still feel the tension radiating from him. I didn't know if he was trying to convince himself that things were okay, or if he was waiting for me to give him permission to act like everything was fine. "Do you think it's possible to go back to how we were?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I couldn't answer right away. It wasn't that I didn't want to, it was that I didn't know. I wanted to believe that everything could return to normal, but the truth was that something fundamental had changed. And I was afraid that if we tried to pretend it hadn't, it would make everything even worse. "I don't know," I admitted. Maybe we can try, but it's not going to be easy." He nodded slowly like he understood, but there was something in his eyes, something uncertain, like he wasn't sure if that was enough for him. Maybe it wasn't enough for either of us. "I don't want to hurt you," he said quietly, his voice breaking a little. "I never wanted to cross that line, but I don't know what happened to me. I don't know how to fix it." I could feel the emotion in his voice, but there was something else there too, something that didn't sit right with me. Was this guilt, or was it something more? Was he truly sorry for what happened, or was he sorry because he was caught in a moment that had gotten out of hand? "You've crossed a line," I finally said, my voice shaking, "and I don't know if we can ever go back from that." He didn't argue. He just sat there, his eyes staring at the floor like he was lost in his own thoughts. I could hear his breathing, deep and uneven, like he was trying to steady himself. "I know," he whispered. "I know, and I'm sorry." It felt like we were stuck in this loop, circling the same painful conversation, both of us trapped in a situation that had no easy resolution. He had confessed, and I had reacted. But now what? What came after this? What did we do next? The silence stretched on, and I could feel the weight of it pressing down on me. I didn't know how to fix this, or even if it could be fixed. I just wanted to run away from it all, to escape this feeling of confusion and discomfort. But then, before I could speak again, he stood up abruptly, as though he had made a decision. "I think we need some time apart," he said firmly, his eyes now locked onto mine. "I think we need space to figure this out."